I am going to speak today. The show is about breaking down psychological and emotional experiences that happen in life. And basically, I am a certified wellness coach. I have a degree in psychology. I'm a certified self-defense instructor, fitness instructor, and I've done work for over 30 years in the wellness field, and I've worked in mental health. And so I like to share how we can understand a lot of the experiences that I think are very common with people. So we understand the psychology in it, we understand how it can play out in our lives, certain traumatic experiences, certain patterns that we get imprinted on as a child that need to be healed, that have dysfunction. Like, how can that manifest? How can we understand it and have compassion for it and work on healing it holistically? So when I talk about things being holistic, I'm talking about all the layers of the self. Okay, so the somatic in our body experience of how the trauma gets stored in our body, the just emotional feeling experience, and then the psychology of the mind and the behavior and everything. So if you would like more information on me, you can go to my website, which is dynamicchange.wellness.com, and it will tell you about all the different things I do in classes and support groups and things I offer for people. And also, I encourage people, if you have something you would like me to discuss, or if you would like to talk about something that I brought up on one of the shows, there's a way you can email me there. So my email is dcwellness88@gmail.com. dcwellness88@gmail.com. So please don't hesitate to do that. I'm really here to problem solve and to really show how we can structure our behavior in a way that works towards healing and find help for more wellness in our lives. So that's really my motivation for all of this. So please, if you have something you need help with, let me know. And then I record these shows and upload them to my YouTube channel. So every week there's another show, because this show is on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock. And the YouTube channel is Michelle Love with Dynamic Change and Wellness. So I hope everyone is fantastic today. And what I would like to speak to, last week I spoke about domestic violence and understanding the definition behind it, because I think it has been forever, unfortunately, a pattern that we have had within our relationships. And luckily there's some people that have beautiful, healthy relationships that don't have any of this. But I think kind of, and I say humanity because I don't think it's like just our culture of Americans. I think around the whole, earth, we've had this pattern of dysfunction when it comes to issues of power and control within relationship. So last week I spoke to kind of understanding the dynamics within domestic violence more. So I'm going to read the definition again. It's not so much just about physical violence. It's really not the basis of the definition, and that's why I really think it's important to talk about this. It's more about the patterns of power and control within a relationship, and this can happen to women and men. Okay, so I've known men that have had this kind of experiences as well. So I would really like to talk about how it can look and grow and manifest in a relationship, so that we can see red flags and start to pull back and shift and change, so we can take care of ourselves, so I can help people understand how they can take care of themselves, get help, and also start healing this pattern. Because the more everyone shifts and learns about it and knows ways they can start adjusting their reaction to it to keep themselves safe, it forces the people that are really perpetrating the abusive pattern part of it to see that it's not going to be tolerated, and that there has to be some self-adjustment here. And so I would like to start out with defining domestic violence. And again, I will give you all the resources of places you can find help as I speak throughout this show today. And so to define domestic violence is any intrusion upon one's partner, ex-partner, with intent wittingly or unwittingly to control, coerce, or do harm. Domestic violence can be verbal, it can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, spiritual, social, or psychological. Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior that escalates and may end in murder, suicide, or both. So the thing is, I think it's so important to realize that these patterns, when I was getting my degree in psychology, I've worked a lot around a lot of therapists and been witness to a lot of that type of work. And what I have found is, it appears to me, I could be wrong, but thus far, within all of my experiences, I really haven't found that unless you go to the organization that specifically helps with this, I really don't feel like we have enough emphasis really put when therapists are getting training and things like that. And again, I could be wrong, but it just seems like this specific type of behavior, I took a course in it, and I thought it was one of the more educational and enlightening and profound things I had studied. And I've studied many, many, many things. And because it's really easy to say something is just abusive and dysfunctional and everything, but when you put it underneath the scaffolding of this is domestic violence, it really gives you this definition of understanding that it's a whole pattern of behavior with the intent of kind of breaking the person that's being abused, kind of breaking them down, really, so they can be controlled. And so understanding the more subtle flavors of it, I think, is so important, because this has been such a huge pattern all around the globe that needs to be addressed, because it's not healthy for romantic relationships, it's not healthy for morale and how people feel about themselves, it's not healthy for having a true healthy intimacy connection with someone, because there's no trust there's no feeling safe. So, and this affects families, this affects kids. The more safety that we have and the more ability we have to feel confident that we can keep ourselves safe and have true intimacy and true connection, this heals relationships, this heals societal connections, this heals family connections. This just creates like healing for the kids, for the future generations. I mean, this is really a big deal. In my book, very big deal. And this is just a old pattern. It's archaic. Let's find a way to move forward. So in order to heal it, because it's been so prevalent, we really need to understand how it plays out, how subtle it can be, and find a way to work with shifting that. So what I would like to start out with is giving you some phone numbers and ways to find help and information. And so the YWCA is the Organization for Domestic Violence Services. And unfortunately, over the years, like the course I took was so fantastic, but I have learned since then that they didn't have the funding to continue that particular course. But if you call them, I'm sure you could find ways to get all the information on what is still available. But their phone number, their hotline, and this is like a domestic violence hotline as well, so if you're experiencing unsafe situations where you really need help, the number to call is 707-546-1234. 707-546-1234. And again, that's for YWCA Sonoma County. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. 800-799-7233. And also, I mentioned this last week, but I'm going to mention again because this book, the title always makes people squirm a little bit. They don't like the title of it, but if you can get past the title, this, to me, it's an old school book written a very long time ago. It was like 1986. I think was just so profound because not only did it talk about domestic violence patterns, but the whole second half of the book, the first part of the book is about people's stories of this pattern and the experience and how it can look and how it played out. The second half of the book, the psychology in this book is about how you can heal it. And if you have a partner that has these abusive patterns, but maybe they're not so far gone where they're willing to actually work on themselves, it shows you how there was even like 2, I think, success stories of relationships where the person that, you know, was portraying the abusive pattern actually looked at that and said, you know, that's not okay. I really do need to look at this. And with the help of the therapist and having all this support, they were able to actually heal that relationship. How profound is that? Because not only does it need to be stopped, but there has to be, you know, the people that are running the abusive pattern have to want to change it. It boils down to that. But at the same time, the more and more education we have this, the more we can offer that intention to people so everyone can grow. So the name of that book, it's called Men Who Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them, When Loving Hurts and You Don't Know Why. It's by Dr. Susan Forward and Joan Torres. And I'm telling you, this book, it is awesome. So awesome. I've read it twice. I tell people about it all the time. I really think it is fantastic. And it was written in 1986. And so also, the phone numbers I have provided you with, the YWCA for Sonoma County, they also have childcare. So if someone is in crisis, because that's a lot of the reason that people get stuck in these relationships is if there are kids involved, they feel like there's no place to turn. What are they going to do with the kids? Maybe they've lost everyone else in their life and they're just, you know, their only connection now, because this is how the pattern plays out often, is the abusive partner is kind of the only other person in their world, unfortunately. So then they feel like, in order for me to leave, how could I even leave? I got the kids. It's so overwhelming. I have no money. I have no place to go. So that's part of what perpetuates this idea that you're trapped and you have no place you can go. So their phone number again is 707-546-1234, and they have childcare, they have shelters, they have places that you can go. So I know these heavy topics that I pick, but I want to see things heal in the world. That's why I bring them up. So put your seatbelts on, we're going to talk about it. So basically, I'm going to tell you how some of this stuff can play out, because there's so many subtle flavors to it. And again, this not only happens to women, this can also happen to men. So we're going to talk about the unhealthy power dynamics. And again, I really recommend Googling the power and control wheel. The power and control wheel is what they utilize to explain this dynamic in a domestic violence like educational setting. So this is the power and control wheel. I'm sorry, it's backwards on the video, so you can't read it very well, but it's talking about how this dynamic happens and how it plays out. And you can Google it, the power and control wheel, okay? And so basically, the relationship, so I'm going to pick just a name that could go for either a man or a woman, all right? So again, this is not about gender, it's about a pattern, okay? So I'm going to pick the name Sam. This could be Samantha or it could be Sam, guy or girl, whatever. So this person got into a relationship with someone, and when Sam met this person, and so Sam's an imaginary person, just so you know, I just make up people so I can explain how this stuff can play out in life. So Sam met their partner, everything seemed really good, very passionate, okay, their partner. So but let's just make the abusive partner's name Pat. This is another name that could go either way. Okay, let's throw a sense of humor in it. So this could be Patricia, or this could be Pat, for Patrick, right? Okay, so Sam met Patrick, or Patricia, and they were always very jealous, and there was all this passion in the relationship, and Sam felt really seen. Sam felt very special because Pat was so jealous, and they were like, but it's okay, you know, they just because they love me so much, right? So then everything seemed really good, and in the beginning, this partner, Pat or Patricia, was charming, was really charismatic, and seemed so strong within themselves, and knew what they wanted, and made all the decisions. You know, maybe was very opinionated, and they kind of ran the show within the relationship, but none of it felt scary at that point. None of it felt necessarily bad. It maybe Sam explained it to themselves that it's passion, that's what love looks like, and they were so, you know, grateful to feel seen and that someone loved them that much. Now there's something else I really want to say that I think is very, very, very important. With my work with people, I'm really trying to show them how to start to listen to their intuition and that voice inside that tells you something doesn't feel right. Now, in these kind of relationships, I think it's really important to know that the people, when we end up in an abusive relationship, the person often grew up with abuse. So let's say Sam grew up with domestic violence in the home, and there wasn't a lot of hitting, but maybe there was a lot of verbal abuse, a little bit of hitting, and being put down, and it was acted out more so towards the mother. So he was a witness to it, or he or she was a witness to it, and so their internal message within their being is that they don't feel good about themselves. And so what I want to separate out here is they don't feel good about themselves. So then, because there's this quality of already not feeling good, there is, when they're treated poorly, that intuition, that gut feeling has a hard time registering that something is wrong. And that's where this can be really tricky to start undo this pattern, this experience in life, is that there is this already desensitization, this feeling that it's okay to be mistreated, that they deserve it, they believed the abusive patterns, which are never true. So you need to know that the person that's being the parent that is struggling in that moment and choosing to be abusive, none of it's true, right? They're broken in that way. So their behavior is not reflecting something that has truth, but the child doesn't know that. So the child imprints on this, believes it, and unfortunately when they grow up, they lose that kind of barometer within themselves of being able to feel like, oh, that's not okay when someone treats me like that. So this is, in my opinion, the hurdle that needs to be overcome. So when I do these shows and I'm talking about the somatic content, I'm talking to you about how you can start to feel deep down within yourself to feel when things are not right. That's why I put so much emphasis on it, because I think so many people have become numb and desensitized that we have a really challenging time being able to understand that we need to resensitize to what's healthy and what is not. So in doing that, I think one step towards it, when you have been very desensitized, so we're going to go back to our imaginary person, so Sam, which could be Sam or Samantha here. Sam or Samantha grew up with domestic violence. They grew up with verbal abuse. They grew up seeing domestic violence against the mother. So they don't feel real great about themselves as a result. Okay, their self-esteem is low, and they identify with abusive patterns, unfortunately. So a way to start understanding is that when Sam as an adult has met their partner that they're going to marry, Pat or Patricia, I made up these names, there is a quality of, you can look at, how does the relationship make you feel? Sam could go, how does this relationship make me feel? And if you just go off of the very simple, does it feel good? Or does it feel not good? But Sam believes, right? So Sam's talking to themselves and they're like, okay, the relationship tends to make me feel bad. I don't understand why. And then Sam could go, I don't understand why, but what they will do is they'll rationalize it because they've been desensitized to the domestic violence pattern. So, but if they can hold on to the thread, okay, the beginning point of this relationship tends to make me feel bad most of the time. That's where you start. So that's what I want to really convey to people, is tuning into their lives, the quality of their lives, and I hope everyone has really healthy relationships. And I also think there's all these gray areas. Sometimes you can have a lot of health within the relationship, but some of these patterns may be there and they could be healed. And you could work this out with your partner. You could get some therapy. But being conscious of the pattern in the first place is important. And sometimes you're already in the relationship, like we're going to talk about Sam's relationship here, this imaginary person, but they can't undo it. They can't solve it, unfortunately, but it's so vital for their safety, for their well-being, and for their healing later in their life, that they are able to start to recognize the red flags and start to understand it. Okay, so for Sam, paying attention to, okay, this is how I feel most of the time with my relationship, and just start with that. So if you make a list, Sam could sit down. Let's say Sam started to work with a therapist at some point later on, okay? I'm going to talk about that kind of as a parallel situation of how they could start looking at this. But unfortunately, I'm going to talk about the whole scenario and Sam's relationship. I'm going to explain how it became abusive with this hypothetical person. But let's just say Sam had a therapist and they were working. They only went to therapy occasionally, checked in with the therapist every couple of months or something. It wasn't all the time. But the therapist was working with this imaginary person, Sam, of how they could start kind of noticing what was going on, okay? So let's say the therapist told Sam, start making a list. What are the good effects of this relationship with Pat on you? How are you feeling with that? What is working well? When do you feel good? What is Pat doing that makes you feel good? And then make a list of what feels that it's hard to describe exactly what it means, exactly what what the, like, Sam can't articulate it. So this is subconscious stuff. So Sam has these experiences from their childhood. So how are they going to be able to understand it from another viewpoint, which is different than something that is like foreign to them? They never learned the healthy patterns. So Sam's like, all I know is I feel this way. I don't understand what it means. And maybe Sam believes I deserve it. And they tell the therapist, I'm sure, I'm not the greatest person, or sometimes I do stupid things, so I deserve to be treated this way. So they may have this really negative belief pattern, negative inner dialogue that they have, that they imprinted it on from being abused as a kid, right? But at least if they're writing it down and they're starting to, and the therapist is like, well, just write it down. Just write it down. You have one list and you have the other list, and just start so we can make sense of this, okay? So let's just say Sam went to this therapist and they're just saying, I just don't feel happy in life. I don't feel happy in life. And I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe this is where this started. Because Sam will probably think it's their fault and not realize, oh, I'm in an abusive relationship where there's all these domestic violence patterns. And so they're just trying to figure out why they're so depressed and upset and everything else all the time. Okay, so that's our scenario. So Sam meets Pat. Everything seems amazing in the beginning. There's all this passion. Pat's very jealous, very controlling in a lot of ways. So basically, they would discourage with the rationale of, I want you all to myself. So Pat tells Sam, I want you all to myself, so I feel really hurt when you don't reserve your time for me. I don't feel enough love. So, these domestic violence people running this pattern, like Pat, they're narcissistic. So it's all about them, and it's all about them getting what they want, and they tend to put down the partner that's being abused. So Sam would be being put down and being worn down by the abuse. Okay, so everything seems great. It's in the honeymoon stage, and the power control wheel, they talk about there's like this honeymoon stage where everything's fantastic. And then, so they're engaged and they get married. So they get married, everything seems fine, and Sam notices that Pat keeps saying that they want more and more of their time. They want to monopolize their time. So they are getting bad reactions, angry reactions, emotionally manipulative guilt and blame from Pat when they spend time with their friends. So they start canceling on their friends. They start doing less with them because they really want this marriage to work. Maybe they've been married before, nothing's worked, and it's really important to them. So they start isolating. So isolation is part of the power and control wheel, the pattern of domestic violence abuse. So isolation is one of the things that starts to happen. So they start spending less time with their friends. And then they stop. Maybe they were part of a volleyball league, and Pat didn't want to do volleyball with them, and they went one time to watch, and they felt like one of the other people on the team were kind of flirting with Sam, and they told Sam, if you love me, you'll quit the team. So then they are isolated even further because they're pulled away from their hobbies. And Sam is doing whatever it takes. Sam's like, I really love Pat. They're the best person I've ever been with. I'm going to do whatever I can. So then they quit the volleyball league. And then from there, Pat starts to have a problem with Sam's regular communication with their mother. Let's say they're really close with their mother, and it's a really positive connection for them. And it's a support system. But Pat's like, your mom, I don't think they ever really liked me, and I'm not comfortable with that. And so they're just kind of rude when they talk about your mom, or they put down the quality of connection within it, and just say, your mom, they They're just trying to convince you that something that they've been struggling. Like maybe Pat wants to move. Maybe Pat wants to move away from the family, wants to move and start over because they're tired of living there. And Sam's upset about it. Sam's like, I don't want to move. I don't feel comfortable with that. My parents are here. I'm still close with my mom, and my friends are here, and there's this situation, right? And Pat's like, no, I want to move. We're going to move. And so they do these things to kind of isolate the partner. So to isolate Sam, they discourage and get upset when they have these connections with other people that could be support structures. So there's that kind of thing. They can use guilt, they can use anger, they can rationalize it all they want, that it's love, or they will say things like, I'm the only person here for you, you need me, you know that if we weren't together that you would be all alone. It's like a gaslighting thing. Okay, so gaslighting is where they're trying to make you feel crazy, and so they wear you down, and they may belittle your work or your ability to earn money. They will put you down. They will say subtle things that make you feel bad about yourself. Maybe they say, oh, you're overweight, or you're not attractive like you used to be, or why don't you work out more and look better for me, or I make all the money, I make way more money than you, or whatever. Like it's all about them having the power to make the money, having the power to make the right decisions for the couple, and they assume superiority in the relationship, and they are very forceful with their decisions, very forceful with their needs and their demands, and they just have this constant minimizing. Let's say like Sam gets really sick, and maybe Sam needed to go to the hospital, maybe they had something really going on, and Pat's like, you're fine, you don't need to go, I'm not going to take you. There's like this denying of their needs, there's this blaming. It's always going to be Sam's fault, and Sam always has to do better in Pat's eyes, and that's what's constantly projected. And it's to wear that person down, to wear Sam down, to where they question themselves, where they feel less confident, where they feel intimidated by the behavior, because there's consequences if they do not do what the abusive partner, Pat, is saying. So if they don't toe the line and go along with all of Pat's ideas and everything else, there's always, at the minimum, blame and guilt, or maybe they pull away from them and like leave for a couple of days, or don't talk to them, or won't be intimate with them. There's punishment. There's like some level of punishment. So Sam starts to feel like they're walking on eggshells within the relationship, that they're noticing that Pat, has these kind of punishing, sadistic behaviors towards them when they don't get it exactly their way. And even when they get it their way, this is the really sad part. And again, we're talking about domestic violence. This is Michelle Love. This show is Dynamic Change. I am hoping and believing and always supporting the idea we can heal patterns within our society. And so we're talking about how domestic violence can play out in an imaginary situation. I've made up names. And you're listening to KPC LP in Petaluma, so that we can recognize the flavors of domestic violence. So the unfortunate thing, Sam, it could be either Samantha or Sam, I picked names that could go for either gender, is in this marriage with a partner that's abusive. Their name is Pat, which could be Pat or Patricia. This can happen to men and women. It's just a pattern. So these dynamics in the relationship, even if Sam does everything Pat wants, this is the really like discouraging, kind of pathetic no-win quality of domestic violence. Even if they do everything Pat wants, the basis of this pattern, because it's about power and control and gaslighting, kind of wearing someone down, is they're going to be abused and put down in some way no matter what they do. Because the basis of this pattern is that the abuser, so in this situation it's Pat, is trying to have a power dynamic over Sam, which means they have to disempower Sam every way they can. They have to make Sam feel as small as possible so that Pat feels nice and big and powerful and can control and monopolize the situation. This is a narcissist, a very abusive narcissist, okay? So, so there's all these flavors of abuse. It can be intimidation, emotional threats, it can be coercion and threats, there can be physical violence, there can be what I like to call emotional violence. Emotional violence is speaking in a way sometimes that the quality of what they're saying is something else is getting hurt. And this is really important. And I'm not talking about like black humor or whatever, like a satire. I'm not talking about that. It's like a quality of humor and communication where it's cruel. There's sadistic cruelty within that never sits well. Like you hear it, you're like, oh man, that's messed up. I can't believe they said that. That's horrible. Maybe they're talking about other people, maybe they're talking about women, maybe they're talking about hurting animals, but there's this sadistic, it's not good natured, like the kind of comedy where someone falls down, that can be funny, right? We've all fell down and accidentally hurt ourselves, and we have to be able to laugh at ourselves. That's very, very different. It's about a level of cruelty, and that's the flavor, okay? So that's something to pay attention to. Someone that has that really mean, sadistic flavor to their sense of humor and and sometimes the partner may be the only person that hears it a lot, right? Because Pat will say what they're really thinking to Sam at times about other people or other situations, and Pat, because they're a narcissist and and maybe this is a really smart narcissist, so they're deliberately trying to trick people into thinking they're a nicer person than they are, they're not going to show this ugliness to everybody. They might pretend to be nice to a lot of other social situations, but behind their back say some really awful stuff, and maybe Sam's the only person that hears it. So these are really big red flags. This is like, wow, not only they're mean, so they're mean people, mean and sadistic, right? And they are trying to manipulate and hide it from other people. So this is a very hidden pattern. Domestic violence is very behind closed doors. It's sometimes not easily visible, but the more we shine a light on it to heal it, the more we expose it. It's just exposing the bully. It takes the power away from it. And I think that is just so important. We got to take the power away from the patterns that result in people getting hurt. It's not okay. This hurts our kids. This hurts generation after generation. This is really unhealthy stuff. So the more we talk about it, the more we educate society on it, the more we educate our kids on, what does it look like to have healthy interactions, healthy romantic relationships. Like, I think that really needs to be the focus, because I don't think we do that enough. I think that basically we kind of just flounder in society a lot, where, okay, good luck. You're on your own. I hope it goes okay. And there's not enough understanding about healthy relating and what that should look like, and how like the equality wheel. So the opposite, on the other side of the power control wheel, is the equality wheel. And the equality wheel, you can also Google, and this is like a non-violent equality wheel that shows you what the healthy dynamics are supposed to be, as opposed to this dysfunctional patterns of the power and control wheel that is domestic violence. Okay? So as the relationship continues, there's all these patterns that show up for Sam and Pat's relationship. So there is intimidation, there is maybe all of a sudden Sam's pet goes missing. This is really bad. I'm sorry, this would be a bad scenario where Pat did something with the animal. How terrible is that, right? They took the animal in the car and dropped it off far away. We won't make it, the worst case scenario, but something like that is terrible, right? Or they took it to the pound or something, and they just lied to Sam about it. The dog went missing, and Sam loves the dog, right? That's Sam's dog. The dog went missing. I don't know what happened to it. Or they had an elaborate story. I found the animal dead, and so this is really terrible stuff. But if someone all of a sudden says something happens to someone, to something so precious to you, and they're not concerned, they're not like, let's go try and find that animal, or, like include you to where you can see the result of what happened. You know what I mean? Like, let's say something did happen to the animal passed somehow. A healthy partner would be like, I found the dog had passed, but they were an older dog and it was just their time, and I found them in the backyard, and, I want to support you, and let's, go and sit down with the animal, and, and do a ceremony or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it should play out in this really respectful, inclusive, really way. It shouldn't feel like there's something hidden where you never see the animal again, where there's just this sense of unknown and something feeling hidden, something feeling really off. And let's say Pat has always joked about harm coming to animals, or just mean things. These are signs. Okay, so someone joking about cruelty to animals, not okay. Someone joking about cruelty to anybody, not okay. It's really not funny. It's not the same kind of humor as, like I mentioned before, if you're watching the movie and the comedian falls down, hits their head, and that's not horrific, right? And we can laugh at that because life is like that. We fall down and we do, it can be funny. It's not like that. This is about something that feels a little disturbing. This is something that sometimes, if they're really intelligent, they might be looking for your reaction. And I think they often do. And sometimes if they do it publicly, maybe they do this to your friends, they're trying to get a register on how much they can get away with. If they can say something really sadistic and off, to see how then they read the room to see how everyone's responding. These are really, like psychopathic kind of behaviors where they are really trying to see how far they can go with their acting out, and they're testing the waters by covering up with humor and saying some really disturbing things. Okay, so you need to pay attention to this stuff. Okay, these are things to on the list. So Sam keeps going back to the list, and the therapist, finds out that the dog went missing, and that Sam never found out what happened to the dog. Pat had made up this story of that all of a sudden, something happened to the dog, and anyway, but I don't want to make too graphic of a story because it's just too upsetting. I don't like to do anything super upsetting, but I'm just saying, like, there was something fishy. But Sam, excuse me, always had this experience of Pat saying really disturbing things about the animals. So Sam tells the therapist this, Pat never seemed to like my dog. They don't seem to like animals. They say these things about animals, and it just really upsets me, and it feels really not sensitive to my feelings. And then all of a sudden my dog's gone, and it's like Pat doesn't seem to be genuine with their concern. They still say mean things about animals. These are the kind of things that don't make sense, and the therapist is like, well, that really doesn't sound very supportive or loving or healthy, right? So they start kind of looking at this. So really paying attention to someone's behaviors, the quality of what they're saying, and how their quality of what they bring to the table through what they say, how they behave, how does it make you feel? That's how you start breaking this down. How am I feeling because sometimes this stuff is so hidden that, and the abusive person, this Pat person, let's say they're really, really smart, so they're really good at hiding their intentions. So it's like a mystery. You have to be a detective of really paying attention to yourself. So this plays out where Pat regularly kind of puts Sam down subtly. They talk about violence towards people and relationship. They even talk about hitting your partner. Then they start kind of breaking things, and they say things to make Sam feel bad about themselves. And these are all really huge red flags, okay? And Pat starts to control the money in the relationship, and they just feel entitled to always be right. They feel entitled to have everything revolve around what they want. And Sam starts feeling more and more upset. They start to even feel a little crazy. Maybe Pat is also really trying to make them feel crazy. It's actually within the domestic violence definition of some examples of how this plays out. It's they can even try to make that partner feel crazy so they can control them. So it's very, very, very destructive. So again, you're listening to Michelle Love, and this is Dynamic Change. We're talking about the dynamics, the subtle behaviors that can be part of domestic violence, so you can understand some of the behaviors around it. And the way to find help, again, is you can call the YWCA in Sonoma County for, this is the Domestic Violence Services hotline, and their phone number is 707-546-1234, 546-1234. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. So again, basically, a lot of this plays out where it feels, the rationale is Sam has a really hard time believing that Pat is this cruel. So because they grew up with domestic violence, and so even though they've witnessed it, they're desensitized to this kind of experience in life. And because Sam themselves is a good person, it's hard to think and understand cruelty. Because if it's not really how you think, you don't really understand it. It's hard to believe. Why would someone intentionally be that cruel or that sadistic? It's really beyond their thought process because they don't think that way. So it's really hard to understand as well. So I think the best thing you can do is notice how your relationship makes you feel for Sam. The best thing Sam can do is work with a therapist and talk with, this is how my relationship is making me feel. These are, how I'm treated. I always feel like I'm wrong. I always feel blamed. I can't do anything right. Pat is angrier and angrier. They are starting to break things and scare me. I feel threatened at times and unsafe. If you start feeling unsafe, it's a huge, huge deal. Feeling unsafe is not love. Feeling intimidated is not love. feeling put down is not love. Okay? Feeling like everything is your fault is not love. Okay? So I think our society, we always have to start really looking at what is healthy love. Okay? So basically, if you feel kind of disturbed and unsafe, that's a really good time to seek help. And again, this is I think really important, is when people are in these situations, they don't know how to get out of it. So if you call the phone numbers, they can start walking you through it. But basically, one of the things they recommend is start developing a plan. So a plan is you pack a suitcase, like if it's unsafe, if it's actually unsafe. So when the person is gone at work during the day, you know they're not there, the abusive partner, you pack a suitcase, maybe keep it at the neighbor's house, or your best friend keeps it in their car, and you decide, okay, I'm going to leave. And then you have the suitcase packed, and then if you can just get away from the situation, go stay with your friend for a week, just to be away from the toxicity of this. And then you let them know, I'm going to be at my friend's house. Do not, block them. Don't even tell them where they're going to be. Maybe just go and be somewhere unknown for a while. Then there's shelters you can go to, and just get away from their influence, where they can't find you, they can't talk to you. You try to have some money set aside where the partner doesn't know where it is, or your friend holds it for you, or you have a separate account somewhere that the partner doesn't know about. But create this distance so you can just get away from it long enough to decide, is this abusive thing that I'm in? Is this safe? Maybe I do need help. And the last thing I really want to talk about here is when children are involved, the abusive partner will often use the children to hurt the other partner. So they will say hurtful things. Maybe they use them as a pawn. And that is just the lowest blow ever. I'm sorry, that is the worst. So if you feel unsafe for your children, unsafe for yourself, even emotionally, that is a big deal. Sometimes the abusive partner, Pat, would say, I would kill myself if you left. Sometimes they, say things like that to manipulate. Or, you make me so upset, Pat would say something like, you make me so upset that I think I could kill myself, or I could even hurt you guys, or like he throws it out there. The person throws it out there like it's nothing, to intimidate the partner, to intimidate this imaginary partner, Sam, right? And then so there's like this veiled threat that the kids aren't safe, the home is not safe, nothing's safe, anything could happen. This is some pretty scary stuff. So calling these places where you can go to a shelter, take the kids, tell the kids, I'm taking us to a safe environment. We're not going to talk to Dad for a week at all. So the kids do not contact him, you don't contact him, and you hide out for a certain amount of time and start to see how you feel. Were you scared? All of a sudden, are you feeling better away from all this toxicity? A good partner, is not going to, may be upset that you leave, right? But they're going to want to work on healing the connection. An abusive partner, they may lie and say that, oh, I'm sorry, it can be better, it can be this, it could be that, but there's still this element of fear, underlying fear that never went away. So basically, the best thing you can do is pay attention to how you feel, the quality of this, and try to get away from it, and then get support. Get a therapist, get a restraining order if there is violence. If you feel like you could be physically harmed, or your kids could be physically harmed, that's enough for a restraining order. That's the other thing you need to know. It doesn't have to get so far where you're actually getting hit. If you feel like it is moving in that direction, there has been threats towards that, that's enough for a restraining order. So, and you can say things like to the abusive partner, if you get away from the situation or whatever, or even if you're there, if you feel safe enough, having people there too, try not to do things alone. Always have, someone in the family, someone else there. If you have witnesses, these abusive people usually will behave a little bit better if there's witnesses, sometimes a lot better. So have as many witnesses as possible and say things like, are you threatening me? Are you threatening me? Why are you still, yelling at me? I will get a restraining order. I will call the police right now. You need to lower your voice. You need, so like having some things of some boundaries. So saying things like, you'll get a restraining order, I'm calling the police are already on their way, like having something, because they kind of just bulldoze over the person being abused. So having some things to set some barriers, but getting out of the situation is paramount. And then those are the kind of things you say. First, you're safe, you pack the bag, you get if you have kids, you get everyone out of there, and the pets, whatever, you all go. And then from there, you can get a restraining order if you need to, get some therapy, and just stay safe, all right? And even if it's not physically violent, if something is emotionally so destructive that you are losing your sense of self, that you are starting to feel crazy, that you are feeling, just like your life is meaningless, these are really important things to look at. So this is something, again, there's so much help out there. And again, these things can be changed. And I've heard happy endings, I've heard of healings. There are ways to move forward from this. But feeling trapped is usually the big hurdle, okay? So again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. Everyone deserves to feel safe. And I think society should have some healing on some very deep levels with these patterns. So, in alignment with everything I've been talking about today, again, you're listening to Michelle Love with Dynamic Change, and this is on KPCALP in Petaluma. And this weekly show, I talk about experiences we have in life, psychological patterns, and I break them down for you. I'm a certified wellness coach, self-defense instructor. I have a degree in psychology, and I'm a fitness trainer, and I've worked with people for my whole adult career in one way or another, whether it was mental health or just working with kids or whatever it was, and I really work to empower people. And so that's why I want to talk about this pattern and how we can move forward from it. And so I want to read about a show we have here at the radio station, which to me goes along with what I've been talking about, the Nonviolent Movement. It's on Tuesdays, 10:30 a.m. to 11 a.m., hosted by Michael Nagler. The Nonviolent Movement with Michael Nagler is a show dedicated to the process of nonviolent transformation of humanity and our societies. And I really appreciate this. This show is what I'm talking about. This show, the Nonviolent Movement, is let's move towards having healthier, safer ways of relating for our kids, our families, our relationships, for our society. Let's find ways to continue to move forward. And again, my name is Michelle Love, and my shows, you can find them on my YouTube station, Michelle Love with Dynamic Change and Wellness. I upload every week's show, and to continue to reach for a safer, healthier world, and I think it's just so important. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope your week is fantastic and you enjoy the rest of your day and find some happiness. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye now.